First of all, thank you so much for being with us today. It's such a treat to just be a fly on the wall during a session like that and to see the kids' response. And I wanted to ask, first of all, especially thinking about the twinkle twinkle moment, is there something about an interaction like that that brings you back to sort of beginner's mind and thinking about what is it when you're first making a sound and first having a connection with the instrument? Is that what it does for you?
Yeah, I love trying to, because for me it's a long time ago, quite literally, that I was beginning learning an instrument. But actually, I find that a lot of the principles that I was taught as a beginner, I had a wonderful teacher, and a lot of the principles that I was taught as a beginner, of course, still apply now. And so it's when working with beginners, it's a case of prioritizing what's hopefully going to be most helpful in that moment. And I love that challenge.
Yeah.
As a teacher to think about what's going to be most helpful and interesting in that moment for the young people. And I find it also really just inspiring to see young people play the cello. That's really touching, I find.
Your advice in that moment was so helpful and down to earth. You know, first of all, keep the song in your head, although that did cause a little bit of confusion among the kids.
Yes,
How do I do that exactly?
Yeah.
And then also just listen to your fellow musicians and try to sort of find the togetherness in that.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like the kind of prompt that you've been able to share before with young players.
Yes, and it's I mean, those things, they do apply for the rest of your life. And what I love about particularly the idea of listening to the people around you, inspiring the people around you, is these are principles that are so prominent in music and so important in music, but also in just general life. And that's one of the reasons I think that music education can be such a powerful thing, because it teaches you empathy and understanding, and the idea of inspiring and raising up the people around you, and that being at the heart of what we do. So that's why I like to talk about that a lot.
You know, for young musicians who are just figuring out their interaction with the instrument, there's so much to remember and so much to sort of get, into your fingers. And I was really struck by the way in which you come in and say, yes, that's important, but also remember, this is a human connection. This is an emotional connection, and I feel like for young players, that must always be a balancing act,
It's certainly always a balancing act. Playing an instrument, there are so many things to think about, and constantly things that are changing and things that you have to control and think about. And that's it's wonderful, but challenging, and wonderfully challenging. I find. And as you say, the balancing of something that is music that is innately emotional and expressive with something that is a physical and technical skill. And both things, of course, feed one another. You have to have the technical facility in order to express those things, but also you have to have a reason to build on your technical facility. And those reasons are very very human and very emotional. And the combination of those two things, I think, are wonderful and important.
One of the students asked when you started playing the cello, and you answered 6 years old. And I wanted to ask about the nature of your music education journey, because you have a musical family, and also some really important teachers that you encountered. So can you characterize your path through music education as an instrumentalist?
Yeah, I began the cello when I was 6 years old, but I have two older siblings who were playing the piano and the violin, and so I started because they were playing, and so I just followed what they were doing in a way, and so it felt like a very natural thing to learn an instrument. My parents were always very into it and very encouraging. I had an amazing teacher in Nottingham, where I grew up, amazing cello teacher, and from the start, the lessons were. I just really enjoyed them, and I enjoyed the idea of being able to spend the week with the cello and really explore and investigate and try and work things out for myself, and then come and have a lesson with a teacher who would guide me through that process and push me to the next level constantly. I found that really enjoyable. I wish I started when I was 6 years old, but I wish I had said to the young people when that question was asked that it's not essential to start at 6 years old or younger. It's not therefore impossible just because you started much later. For example, the greatest cellist, one of the greatest cellists of all time, Rostropovich, didn't start until I think about 10 or 11 years old. So I had 4 years head start, and I'm still. So no, I think it's about the consistency of working and the focus and the dedication to it that ultimately makes the difference. So I wish I'd said that, but I forgot.
Well, you alluded to this idea of being motivated by your time with the instrument. There's a sort of false dichotomy that sometimes comes up between sort of the discipline of learning something and then the freedom or the play side of it. And it sounds, and hearing you play, I think it's very clear that there is something in just the interaction with the instrument and the sound that is inherently exploratory for you. Can you describe the way in which, even from a really young age, getting your technique together was actually exploratory or some version of play?
It always, I was very often taught like that, I guess. To me, this idea of using this instrument to find as many different sounds and colors and ways of expressing, basically, and that's a really, when you get really into it, it's an endless and wonderful and enjoyable process. It requires a lot of consistency because, as we talked about at the beginning, there's so many things to think about and so many combinations of things that can contribute to making a sound. But I think the motivation for all of that practice, I think, is to have as big a range of expression as possible.
Yeah.
That's ultimately the goal.
Now, pulling back from education for a moment and talking about performance and presentation, you've really been vocal and quite active in trying to expand the frame for classical music and bring it to, first of all, a broader audience and open it up in a certain way. Has this been, have you found it to be a challenge?
Yes, certainly. I think, I suppose with any change, I think there are always many, many different things that have to happen and often have to happen together. I think education, of course, is a big part of it, and programs like this, I think, are wonderful for that reason. I think there has to be a willingness from the performers on stage to bring about that change. So I think a lot of the responsibility is on us as musicians and as performers, both in how and what we play, but how we talk about what we do as well. And so I find and I think that it will be a constant thing that I'm thinking about and talking about. But I am seeing a lot of change, certainly since I was a child, in what I see on stages.
It seems
so
like
it's positive.
with your choice of repertoire, you've been able to say, okay, this is the canon, and we can bring this into it. We can sort of open this up, and from my outsider's perspective, it seems like that's been really heralded. But in your effort to bring different materials into your performance practice. I mean, have you felt that was applauded, lauded, or do you feel that you've had some speed bumps in doing that?
Well, I think sometimes, particularly with programming, the difficulty with that is people, audiences come to the concert having not heard you play this program, and so it's therefore often difficult to program unfamiliar repertoire, I think, for a lot of artists. Hopefully, over time, you can build a trust with your audience, and then are able to program perhaps a wider range of things with that trust. And I try to make the most of the trust I feel I have with audiences in lots of different places, because ultimately, I think performing things that are meaningful and that I have a strong connection with, I think is going to be the most powerful. It's going to have the most powerful impact on the audience, but only once they're in the room with you. That was a really odd way to answer that question. No, I don't even know if I did.
I think you did, and I'll just note that at the end of this time with the Play on Philly students, when you had the opportunity to perform, you're playing a piece that every cellist of note has recorded, and for these students, I'm sure that for some of them they were hearing it for the first time, but the thing that I feel made the connection was really this idea of you putting yourself into that piece, which is a universal expression, and so then it just becomes about, well, this musician is speaking through this piece of music, and that's, I was watching very carefully. I was watching the students, and that's what I noticed, and so in that situation, it's not about the particular piece. It's not right. It's
just I think and I like to play. I often like to play Bach for that reason, because I think it has such a I don't know. It's music that demands such an openness from the artists playing it. It demands a lot of focus, but also a lot of creativity. And I think that definitely can communicate to anyone. I hope. And this particular prelude, I think, is such a positive and fulfilling piece of music. So that's why I I chose it, and it felt like the right thing. But I haven't played that in a long time, and so it just felt like the piece to play in that moment. To be honest.
Well, it was a beautiful way to conclude the session, and it was a pleasure to hear your sound in that room as well, with all the sort of kids rustling and everything else. Very, very real. And as we say, very human. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's a real pleasure. And it was wonderful to see you working with the student musicians. I'm sure that they will not soon forget this afternoon.
It was really a massive pleasure, and I loved hearing them. And I also won't forget this afternoon, because I always find the experience of seeing young people playing can be the most touching thing. So it was wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.